As we journey through the Bible together, some days I try to do things that are more personally inspiring and touching, and sometimes it's important as we move through the biblical narrative to highlight where we are in the story. And today, as we begin First Kings, not surprisingly, we're going to move into a book that's going to talk about the kings, the leaders who are going to be ruling in Israel and in Judah. And there is conflict right at the beginning of 1 Kings chapter 1 in looking at who is going to be David's successor. When we open 1 Kings, David is now an old man. He's very near the very end of his life. And the question is, who's going to be the next king? And for people who like watching things about royal families and all the intrigue that goes on, there's plenty of it in 1 Kings chapter 1. Because it seems like Adonijah, who is David's oldest living son, he and some of David's older followers, like Joab, that faithful, loyal military commander, and others, they think Adonijah is going to be king. But you have the prophet Nathan and Zadok who are angling to make Solomon as the next king, even though he's not the next in line by age. So there's all sorts of things going on. You'll want to read 1 Kings chapter 1 to find out. It turns out that Solomon is the one who's going to be king, and in chapter 1 and in verse 34, it says, "There let the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan anoint him king over Israel. Then blow the trumpet and say, 'Long live King Solomon.'" Part of what I want to point out to you is if you look in chapter 1, especially in verses 32 to 37, you'll see that what is done as part of announcing that Solomon is going to be the next king may in some ways remind you of another story where people are praising a son of David and using words that seem like anointing a king. And that's Jesus' Palm Sunday entry into Jerusalem. You have a similar sort of festivity and announcement and praise. So as we turn through 1 Kings, part of what we're going to see is that the quality of leadership, unfortunately, will not be sufficient to meet the needs of the people. 1 Kings is a book, by its title, you can imagine, is largely about politics, but it's even more so about moral and ethical leadership, and sadly, how the kings of the people will fail them time and time again, and they'll be corrupt and greedy and deceitful, and they will turn aside from the Lord, the God of Israel. And when that happens, it's trouble for the people.